Welcome to Standard Theory. In the previous segments we introduced the Z-scale and its low-energy communication types including metaphysical communication, impulsive communication, compulsive communication and compulsive impulse. In this segment we will discuss rolling communication, which is considered a positive communication type on the Z-scale. On the Z-scale the constructive starting point can be referred to as the turnaround at negative 180 characteristics. The positive direction from the turnaround would trend from negative 180 to negative 178 to negative 176 and so on. The tendency to move in a positive direction concerns the range from the turnaround all the way back to the point of the gap from an inverted direction for a total range of negative 180 to negative 118, about 62 characteristics total in the positive direction. As discussed previously, the horizontal gap is experienced between the processing of the positive 117th and 118th characteristics. When moving from the gap to the turnaround and then moving from negative 180 characteristics in the positive direction, the capacity for accessing these positive, high-energy processes is limited. Since the horizontal gap theoretically reduces the access to the high-energy structures, the low energy of the Z-scale will access only a portion of the high-energy compressions. The process of impulse from the Z-scale can still partially access the high-energy storage related to the scale of intelligence. This partial capacity is related to the consequence of the gapping process as well as the proportion of information contained in an interval ratio subtraction versus the information in a high-energy characteristic. These specific ratios can be discussed later. For now, we will assume that the low-energy impulse only activates about 2/3 of the information that should be contained in a complete high-energy process. For this reason, when communication through rolling communication, there seems to be no true ending point or no true compression of those communication cycles. For this reason, the tendency in rolling communication is to activate some amount of information in the positive direction followed by another activation, then another and then another. Each time this happens one may feel as if the complete point or the entire version of the compression has not been activated or has not been completely communicated. This is the reason for the name rolling communication, as the cycles continue rolling over into one another. These partial activations can be referred to as pseudo-additive. These pseudo-additive processes in rolling communication are similar to the characteristics of the R-scale as well as the subtractions in the negative direction of the Z-scale. It is important to mention that, even though this pseudo-additive process deals with a non-standard amount of information, this type of communication can be considered constructive in some sense. As mentioned previously, most cycles of communication can be considered constructive or destructive by determining whether the purpose is to communicate more information or to increase the amount of information being communicated. Inversely, the communication is destructive if the amount of information being communicated is decreased or the understanding is decreased. In rolling communication, if the purpose is constructive, the sum of each of the rolling cycles will terminate in a process referred to as an initiative. In a destructive sense, the termination of these processes can be referred to as a derogative. These are comparable to the directive and deferral of supersocial communication. At this point we have covered the entirety of the Z-scale. We discussed the horizontal gap which leads to post-intelligent processing on the Z-scale. We also discussed the result of that process which begins at negative 180 characteristics, also known as the turnaround. From there, we moved in the negative direction to negative communication types. Those are metaphysical, impulsive, compulsive and compulsive impulsive communications. We also started from the turnaround and moved in the positive direction in rolling communication. With those, the entire Z-scale has been covered. Please join me in the next segment as we review and summarize the Standard Behavioral Index.